Ha! It is I, Alphinius Goo, here with Joe.
Greetings!
It's Joe saying greetings, and we are here to talk to you today about how to run the amazing, the marvelous Dungeon of Dunix. Yes.
Yes, in 4 hours.
A 16-hour module, which will be done in 4 hours. Joe is truly a wizard, and here is how we do it. So, my friend, first of all, we're at a convention. Yeah. We're trying to engage the players sitting around the table. What is the mood you strive for?
Yes, so it is a call to action. In this case, you are actually going up against a set of cultists. You know that they're going to summon something. You don't know what it is yet. You know it's going to be something horrible, and that if you do not find them within a certain amount of time, you're all doomed.
So it sounds a little Cthulhu-esque to me.
Yes, I would say that is definitely the case.
Jeff Richard, our friend from Chaosium, would love to hear that. Hello, Jeff. So you set the mood as sort of this dire, dark thing.
Yes, and a time limit in this case.
Right, and you only have a certain amount of time. So you're going to put a ticking clock in place.
Absolutely. So the player expects a dungeon crawl more than anything else in here. There are going to be some riddles. There's going to be some combat. There's going to be some pieces where you're going to need to figure all this out. And then in addition, there is that, compression that you've got to find this big bad guy before everything goes all to crap.
Yes, the 4-hour ticking
exactly.
clock.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so the players have come in, they've sat down at the table, you've not really talked to them before.
No.
So what do you do first?
Yeah, so, first, obviously, everybody's going to get their characters, of course. Mm-hmm. And then...
Yes, because pregens, right, is much more efficient, yes?
Yeah. And I usually use, for a 4-hour compression, a flashback type of scene. So this module is meant to be run at about 16 hours. There's a whole section where you're going to go through the Dead Hills. Unfortunately, we're going to have to cut that out.
So the Dead Hills are in Verdestia, right? And there's a place there called Mu'uz Duran. And this is the ultimate place that they are striving to get to, yes?
Exactly. I will say something like, ahead of you is the dark entrance of a cave choked by thorny bushes and wide trunk trees. You've traveled for several days to the Dead Hills, this forbidden mountain. And then I talk through a little bit about that. And I say, but 3 days ago, you were hired by 2 individuals, Balthazar and Astamar.
Balthazar and Astamar. Yes, it rhymes. And these are some of our famed community members.
There's a section in the Dungeon of Dunix where you can go through parts of the lore, and I truncate part of that. But this is all a flashback.
So you bring them out.
Yes.
And you say these people were the ones who sent. And do you allow players a chance to interact?
Absolutely, yes.
How does that work?
Yes, so I will say, okay, so I will go through all of the lore around this, and there's some really important parts of lore. In addition, I'm going to say, you're going to get this object right here, which is the Carrion Stone, and this is very important for this. They tell you in particular that you are going against the Cult of the Hollow Moon, and that the Cult of the Hollow Moon is going to be summoning, you don't know what, but there is a term, Zeraxxus, that has been thrown around from a scout that has come back. They had sent other previous scouting parties. That party had died. Only one scout comes back, and he said something about Zeraxxus, and that's all they got out. So you are really the second party that is going in. Then I give them an opportunity to say, well, okay, so even though this is a flashback, what questions did you ask Balthazar and Astamar? And then give them some time to go through that.
And you kind of go around the table, give everyone an opportunity?
Yeah.
Yes, because very important. We want to always engage all of the folks at the table, not just the table dominator.
Exactly.
Yes. Give no time to the table dominator. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So you give them a chance to ask the questions.
Yeah. What do you think the most common question I've been asked is?
Where are we going?
Actually, it's how much are we getting paid?
Oh, those mercenary bastards.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So I just say 250 gold a person.
Other questions that typically come up?
Yeah, so a little bit about, do we know anything about Zeraxxus? What does this Carrion Stone do? From Astamar and Balthazar, they've learned about the lore. Yeah, and Mu'uz Duran, very important lore here. So we had an Aethernic city that has...
Flying city.
During the Woe of Ruin, basically lost all of its magic power and crashed into a dwarven hole down below here.
Turned upside down.
Exactly. And that's where the Dungeon of Dunix is set. That's one of the other pieces that I weave into this lore. So they know something about this.
I love Mu'uz Duran.
I do too. I think it's beautiful.
Everything, it's like the Poseidon adventure, because everything's upside down.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
All right. How do you kind of fill them in on sort of this background beyond the lore, right? So now do you tell them about when they're interacting with them in the flashback?
Yep, I do that lore scene as we go through the flashback.
Okay.
Then in addition, I will give them that, you traveled through the Dead Hills, you ran into, birds that had multiple eyes. You will see these rabbits of unusual size, things like that. This was obviously a corrupted.
Is that the RUSSs?
Apparently, yes. Exactly.
ROUSSs.
Yes. Yeah. And now you are here. This is exactly where you are, and you have finally come to this cave that doesn't look like very much. But you know that this.
And are there multiple entrances into this Uzdaron? Is that, or how do you get them to write the right entrance? Is that part of the lore?
Yeah, and part of what I use is that Carrion Stone. So, and this is important in running in a 4-hour adventure, that Carrion Stone is going to be, this particular object is going to be the thing that will help direct your players in different directions, because what you can use the Carrion Stone for is to pull them. You could say the Carrion Stone, you feel a pull in your pocket, and this Carrion Stone moves you towards this entrance. And they're like, oh, that looks like the right place.
Yes. And perhaps in our home games, we might not use such a device because it's a little scripty, right? It's a little directionally. But in a
4-hour game,
you have to push
you have to push it.
So the Carrion Stone is your device
to
help them find their way.
Exactly. Typically, I'll have them squeeze in the initial cave that you enter.
So this is the whole map, but you don't use the whole map.
No, and you really can't. Again, this is a 16-hour adventure. So this is where I'm going to credit Alexander quite deeply here.
Alexander is magnificent.
Yes, Alexander is magnificent. Alexander said, in running this in 4 hours, there's actually 2 directions that the players can go initially, and then they end up to the same spot. They can either come around here to the right, and then they end up in this single spot here, or they can go around to the left and end up in that single spot right there too. And as long as you keep the players moving one of those 2 directions, they will both end up here within about that 4-hour time frame to finally run into the big baddie.
But the big baddie is not really in that room.
That's correct.
At least in the adventure.
That's correct.
Okay.
The way to run this is to essentially cut out all, and I feel bad about doing this because this stuff up here is really cool to go through. But to run it in 4 hours, you have to cut out all of these rooms and say, by the time you get to here, that's where your big baddie is. That is room D23.
How brilliant. Move D23.
Exactly.
Yes.
I mean, you can do that, right? Typically, I've cut out a bunch of these pieces, and then, this is the DM's map that you're looking at because we're doing the DM overlay here. So typically, I will cut out these pieces so that they don't see any of that. And then one way or another, I'll either let them run through this, or of course, I often will draw out the entire map in different ways and then lay out different pieces of that. And that's one of the ways that I prep. There is a certain specific room that we do need to talk about. Let's talk about the statue. This room is one of my very favorites. This has a riddle to it. There is a dwarven statue. The players have to work through the riddle to get through that statue.
Because they're in part of the dwarven hold, correct?
That is correct. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So they're in the dwarven hold by this time. They've actually squeezed through a narrow chamber and finally come to this room. And I think this is just beautiful and how this is all illustrated. The problem with this one is if you just let your players sit there and flounder, they will hit a point where you'll run out of time, and you really will. Give them hints, or allow them, if it's something close, let them go through.
Yes, if they did a good job and they answered the riddle well with something that wasn't quite the riddle, it's okay to give them that, right?
Absolutely.
A little insight check here and there, a little bonus, a little note handed under the table to a certain player, especially one who hasn't been as involved, right?
Yes,
hey, guess what? Here, let's take this. Yes, beautiful room.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. And so you want to get through this in about 10 minutes, and then that leads you into the rest of the dungeon crawl.
How many rooms should we, if we're doing this right, how many rooms are we going to get through by the time we get to the moved D23?
Usually you will have gotten all the way to what's called D10. You will have gotten through all these rooms from D1, 2, 3, D4. If you go to 15, 16, 17, you will have gotten through all those.
Okay.
The thing you want to limit is your combat encounters.
How many? Is there a rule?
Yeah, so you're going to want 2 or 3 maximum combat encounters during this. And you want to make sure that those are relatively quick fights. It is okay to wound the players. A couple bits of advice on this one.
Is it okay that the opponents go down a little early?
Yes, it is. And you're going to really have to, because there are so many combat encounters.
One thing we didn't talk about, which we should probably talk about, make sure our game masters are ready, is level appropriateness and how tough are these characters and all that stuff. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is meant for level 8 to 12 characters. The characters on the convention that we're giving you are 6-level characters. So they are very easy to kill everyone off if you just go with what's written. So typically you're going to be lowering the encounters based upon the GM book, and you're going to be watching that very closely. It is okay to have damaged all the players so that they may take a short rest or something similar, but you want to watch that very carefully.
So in many cases, you might want to use the weaker party stats.
That's correct.
For the GM reference.
Yeah, that's absolutely
And
correct.
again, we know how this goes, right? Skill of players, how many players, do you have 10 at your table, or do you have 8, or do you have 4, right? All that stuff plays into the thing. So level 6 is the pregens. Now they're tough level 6.
Yes, they are tough level 6.
But meant for really level 8.
Yeah, and this is the one Gooey Cube game that I did a TPK on.
Oh.
It's
so it is pretty tough. So you TPK'd a party at a convention?
Yeah, I did a Ghengis Con.
Whoa. Did it work out okay?
Well,
they weren't pissed and throwing dice?
No. To their credit, they split the party, sent the spellcasters in front to surprise the party and throw fireballs, and then run back and tell the rest of the party, who was, a fair distance away, to come and help.
So they sent the spellcasters in to try to surprise the big baddie?
Yes.
And then the spellcasters were supposed to cast their fireballs.
And then the spellcasters...
And run back.
Yes, that's right.
Like the knights running away from the bunny.
That is correct.
In Holy Grail.
Yes, absolutely.
So they're going through, they've had 2 or 3 combat encounters max.
Exactly.
Right? That's the goal. Yes?
That's the goal.
So we got 2 or 3, and it depends on time.
Yes.
And don't be afraid to shave them if you need to.
Yes.
Because the last one's going to be a tough combat. It's going to take a while.
Absolutely. So
tell us about this last big baddie in the combat.
So quite literally, when you're going into this, you want to have about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes left of the game. So when you're hitting this, you are now at about 2 hours and 45 minutes. If you're going past that, you're going to want to scale this one. So the cultists have summoned Zeraxxus. Zeraxxus is not at full power, but this combat is very, very tough. And
but we definitely toned it back for the 8th level characters, or now 6th level characters.
6th level characters, yes.
That's typically Gooey Cube's way. We are really, really tough. Oh no, all those people who write me all the time and say our adventures are too weak.
Like I said, this party that I TPK'd. Yes, TPK'd. Opened the door to Zeraxxus. They got into a lot of spell combat. They found out that there are some counter spells that get thrown in this. And so their fireballs didn't go off.
I love counter spells.
Yes. So the 2 spellcasters went down. The party, because one of them had a haste spell cast on them, realized that and then said, oh no, we need to run up there and basically get into combat. So they went charging in, basically down a corridor into lightning bolts and everything else, which is why, they did not survive that combat very well. Yes. Most other players, once they get all the way through all of these, work their way up there, realize, and you give them a lot of hints on this. You give them chanting in the distance. You tell them that something is coming in one way or another.
Yeah, because in the room is not just Zeraxxus.
Right. There's
cultists.
All his minions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Minions. And not like those little cute things in that movie.
Yes. Yeah. And tip for the DM, spread all the minions around the room like they're having a ritual, because this also means that the players can't come in and say, oh, fireball, fireball, fireball. Genuinely make this a difficult combat for the players tactically, so they have to think about all these different pieces.
It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully everything has worked out. You haven't TPK'd them, yes?
Yes.
How do you conclude the adventure?
Yeah, so typically after this combat, they will talk a little bit about what they find and some pieces about that. And then I will have a close up where they are bringing this back to Balthazar and Astamar to talk about this is what we've seen, and that we also suspect that these cultists will be back, because this dungeon is much deeper than what we've seen here.
So in their flashback, they were at the Grey Dog Inn. We didn't talk about that.
Exactly. And and so we will bring them back to the Grey Dog Inn. I do usually use this picture briefly to say, this is where you were in the flashback. Yeah. You were in Darkenhaven. You were at the Grey Dog Inn. And then talk them through that. And this is where you're going back to report, one, we survived. Your other scouts didn't survive. And then it looks like that there might be more activity going on here, because, we know that we face Zeraxxus, but there seemed to be a lot more cultist activity. Still going on.
In the area.
Yes.
What are some of the challenges you think that game masters will face as they're prepping for this and then running it?
Biggest problem is your time constraint.
Because it really wasn't intended to be a 4-hour module.
Yeah, it's really meant to be a 16-hour module. And so you've got some tools to do that. One of them is to put a little bit of pressure on the players. Don't allow them to take short rests easily. Continue to move them along with encounters. Use the Carrion Stone to move them along. You know, for me, I typically also draw out the maps and then I'm putting them down as they go through because you don't have that much time. Watch those combat encounters. And in particular, you know, when you go into this combat, you really should be about an hour and 15 minutes left.
And the ticking clock that you brought in earlier, right? Yeah. They have learned from Balthazar and Astamar, there's potentially a time limit, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And this, if we don't get it done, it's going to be in trouble. We mentioned that right at the beginning.
Absolutely.
So you know, you can always be.
Yeah, and you can ratchet that up too. One of the things that I'll do, you know, I will have them here chanting in certain parts. They will notice that cultists have apparently moved through this area but are gone.
Oh, so they can see footprints
and other things like that. One of the other things that I've done is because I have had some players who have gone through this very quickly and gotten to that last room, I will put a thing called a loading room before D23. And there's several different pieces.
The fake D23.
It is the fake D23. Yeah. The one I like the most is the font of, you know, blood, the one where they come in where the cultists were chanting and summoning stuff. And there's a chain demon that is there chained in a box.
And is that in the book or is that one you make up over your own?
That is in the book.
Okay. So the font of blood is in the book. Yeah. So you can use that as a loading room.
Exactly. So they get there and they realize there's some ritual that has gone on. And then that the next set of rooms they're going to move into is this. That's if they're going quickly, because that does happen as well.
So role play in a dungeon crawl can be sometimes challenging, right?
Yes.
And I know that in the Dungeon of Doonix, we did put some things in here to kind of aid the role play thing, even though it truly is a dungeon crawl.
Right.
So what do you do?
Yeah, so there are some certain spots where you will encounter some dwarven spirits.
And or True Hammer and Thea Ironbraid.
Exactly.
They're ghosts.
But they're ghosts.
Spirits, yes?
Exactly, they're spirits. Most of the players will not be belligerent around these ghosts. They will actually truly try to roleplay with them. And I have the ghosts actually give them a little bit of information about what's coming up. They know that there are these cultists that have recently infiltrated, you know, basically the dwarven stronghold. They don't like that. The ghosts really want you to root out.
This is their home
as well. This is
even though they are no longer living, right?
Yes, exactly. They've also seen, if you go back to this encounter, they've been animating the dwarven skeletons, and they hate that.
Taking away their rest.
Exactly. Yeah, and so this also pushes
and they can point them in directions too. You can even use them as pointers, right?
Absolutely, and I do. That's exactly it.
Any last thoughts as we wrap up for our game masters as they think about running the Dungeon of Doonix?
Yeah.
The 4-hour dungeon.
The 4-hour and that's the biggest point, right? Is that you are going to be moving and steering your party relatively quickly through this dungeon. Watch the combat encounters more than anything else, because that will eat up your time more than anything else in this.
Yes, and if you have a role play heavy group, maybe they only need one combat encounter. A little more ghost, little more ghost action.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And there's actually, on the other side, you can interact some with the cultists there, and you can get some information that way. And yeah, you can have some role play. Granted, it's probably going to be a prisoner in this case, but you can get, and it's a cultist who's a little pissed off too because they get locked out of a room. So you can use some of that role play to change what's going on. The exploration pieces also within this are wonderful. There's
a lot of good.
There's a lot of
GUI additions that you could bring if you don't want as many combats.
Yep.
There's a lot to do. It's a great module.
I do. I love it.
Beyond managing time and all that stuff, which of course is very clear, that's the most important thing. Anything else?
Yes, and that is just to read the table and understand what everybody's interacting. I mean, you'll see some players that'll be slightly disengaged, you know, bring them back. There's a lot of pieces in here that you can have them examine, find out if they like the exploration, they like the combat, what other things.
And I love the declarations, right? Because that way you make a person actually do something rather than just sort of letting the flow, right? Declarations being, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? And managing it that way when you have a table, especially where there's a couple of dominators.
Exactly.
Dominators. And then perhaps a couple of very shy people.
Yes. Absolutely.
So, yes. All right. The Dungeon of Doonix.
Haha. And may all your adventures be sticky.
Yes, that. High five.